You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about Walter Cronkite moon rings, about autographed Daryl Strawberry earrings.
That was the best one.
About very special earrings that were originally handcrafted for the Grand Wizard of China back in the 4th century.
I got excited about the Daryl Strawberry one. I love an 86 Mets reference.
I would watch, and I'm sure that we'll get into the shooting of this movie, but I'm sure that there is an hour-long cut of him just
I would watch all of that.
So funny.
I'm Jodie.
I'm Andrea. And we watched
Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yay. I can't believe I'd never fully seen this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like a bad American or something.
Well, and I said to you, there are certain movies, like I've never seen, I've never sat down and watched from beginning to end A Christmas Story.
I thought that was what you were going to say.
Yeah, I've seen all the parts of it on those marathons. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of those where they do the marathon showing on Thanksgiving. I don't know when that started, but
definitely
it is
wasn't happening when I was a child in the Stone Age. But I do know that my dad liked this movie and watched it at home probably more than once, and so it's something that was like just on.
Right.
And I think I assumed I'd seen it because it's part of that group of movies that like I associate with him watching and laughing at home. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It is part of my Thanksgiving tradition for sure. It makes me.
So you're going to watch it anyway.
So I was 100% going to watch it anyway. Felt a little weird to watch it so early in the Thanksgiving week for me.
Yeah.
But yeah. I don't. This isn't to make our listeners feel sorry for me. I don't have a lot of family. We don't do a lot of family stuff. I'm usually I have become everybody's like holiday house sitter, and so I am often alone on Thanksgiving, which I am so fine with. It is not a sad thing for me, but I have a lot of Thanksgiving traditions because of it. One of them is this movie. One of them is listening to Alice's Restaurant. One of them is there's a podcast I love called Till Death Do Us Blart, which is it's the McElroy brothers and a couple other hosts, and
that is not where I thought you were going.
Every year they watch Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 and then record a podcast about it. And I have never seen Paul Blart Mall Cop 2.
Oh my God.
This podcast is everything to me. I always say it's my favorite podcast. They only do one episode a year and it is an eternal podcast.
Oh my God.
And they have said that when one of them dies, they've already chosen replacements to take over for them and they're just going to do it forever. And I highly, highly, highly recommend giving Till Death Do Us Blart a listen. This is their 9th year doing it.
I mean, I aspire to that like committed of a bit in my life at some point.
And some years they are miserable watching this movie, and it like the descent from them, like in the first episode being like, isn't this so funny that we're gonna do this forever, to like 2020 was kind of bleak. Ooh, understandably so, right? And so it's
oh my God. Well, and there's also there's also Sandwich Night.
Yeah, Sandwich Night is fast approaching. Which is Chris Gethard's sandwich holiday.
Yeah.
Which
all you need to know.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about sandwiches.
That's literally it. And there's also The Last Waltz. Like my Thanksgiving plate is full, and I really look forward to it.
Yeah.
And so I did watch this again a little early in the week for me, so I don't know. I mean, maybe I'll watch it again after our conversation and see like what new.
Well, you also have next week's movie to watch. Maybe I hope that doesn't become a Thanksgiving tradition. But...
do you recommend that I don't? Shouldn't be my Thanksgiving. One of my Thanksgiving movies.
I actually think that I don't want to give too much away, but I think that it's not a depressing movie, and it's a movie that'll make you think about art and life in like a sort of contemplative way.
Cool.
Which, if you're in the mood for that, you know,
I'm always in the mood for that.
Yeah.
I know that I'm the one who brought us Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and My Cousin Vinny.
You're the John Candy,
exactly. I contain multitudes.
Yeah. You're like an onion. But yeah, no, my Thanksgivings used to be really big family events. I'm in sort of a lull in that right now as I take care of my mom. But like, They used to be, but our Thanksgiving travel was never dramatic because we lived in northern New Jersey and we only went an hour and a half north to Connecticut. And so my dad would make us get up at like 5 a.m. and drive on Thanksgiving morning because he was not having the traffic bullshit.
Right.
So we never dealt with any of the craziness around that.
Me and your dad, the more you reveal about him, like the number of times I have left for some trip at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning just so I don't have to sit in traffic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, like he hated flying. So like when we went to Florida to see my grandma, we would drive and we would leave at like 2 a.m. Like so that he could drive in the middle of the night and miss the traffic. Yep. So yeah. So we would drive to southern Connecticut, an hour and a half away. And I would get really excited to see all my cousins and we would have like just a huge meal with like hard sauce and pie and
what sauce?
Hard sauce. I know it sounds gross.
Sauce.
It sounds gross.
Hard sauce.
Yeah, I know. But it's basically made with like, okay, wait, guess. It usually goes with mince pie, which I don't like. I put it on apple pie.
Is the sauce vegetarian?
Absolutely not.
Oh. Is it like a stuffing, like a dressing?
Oh, well, it's vegetarian. It's not vegan.
It's not
That's
vegan.
What I'm thinking. Yeah.
So it's. I don't know. I have no clue.
It's basically
like a chutney?
No. It's like it looks like a harder version of frosting. It's got rum in it, and it's incredibly sweet.
So it's for dessert.
But it goes on like a mince pie to balance out the like.
Okay.
But I put it on apple pie because I'd rather have sweet on top of sweet.
Sweet. How do you? This is. We're going to talk about this movie eventually, but
it looks like lard. Famously in my family, one year my
where
cousins,
did this come from?
Probably Germans. One of the years in my family, there was a famous hard sauce incident where my where my cousin's wife thought that it was leftover grease or lard and threw it in the trash before we had a chance to eat it. And she's never lived it down. That was over a decade ago.
This sounds delicious.
It fucking is. And nobody makes it.
We shouldn't call this a sauce.
No, it's like a frosting or a pie topping.
It is 3 simple ingredients: butter, powdered sugar, brandy. And then
that's
vanilla
brandy,
extract
rum.
if you want. It seems that you can substitute rum, cognac, sherry, whiskey, rum extract if you don't want actual alcohol. It's sounds incredible.
Also referred to as brandy butter. It's
my God.
Insane. It's really meant for mince pie, but it's so good on any pie.
Yeah, it says steamed pudding, mincemeat pie, bread pudding, fruit cake. The more like gingerbread, the more like
spicier. Yeah. But I put it on apple pie and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that truly sounds incredible.
Yeah. So that was our family tradition, was that.
Is that your favorite part of the Thanksgiving meal? I feel like we should do a little Thanksgiving breakdown here.
I'm not into turkey.
Yeah, me. Well, I mean I don't eat it, but even when I did, I wasn't.
Yeah. Although when I was growing up, one of the other sort of traditions was that my Uncle Chris would cut the turkey very dramatically. And every now and then, if you asked for dark meat, he'd just throw like a giant turkey leg on your plate and hand it to you. But yeah, as I've gotten older, it's like I like all the veggie sides. I like the Brussels sprouts. I like pie. But that's about it. Like I could just eat Brussels sprouts and like pie and be perfectly happy.
All about the Thanksgiving sides. My favorite part of Thanksgiving is the leftover terrible sandwiches you make with all the sides. So
yeah, we used to do it really big with my family because I have a big extended family, but in the past few years with my mom being older, it hasn't been as much of a thing.
Yeah, but I think has become pretty standard, especially I think with COVID, like bringing those traditions back, I think for a lot of people has been tricky. So
I know it's kind of sad. I used to love those giant meals, but like I was an only child essentially, like
right,
and so like I have 2 half brothers, but they didn't grow up with me, so I loved the like giant family gathering that was full chaos because it wasn't my daily life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I had a couple of like adoptive families growing
Yeah.
up, especially through like high school and my younger adulthood. So I've done the big like who were big Jewish Italian families, and so I've done the big family
Yeah.
dinners that way, and there is something really sweet and like fun about the chaos of that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We were the adoptive family. My Uncle Chris would take in anybody.
Oh, I love that.
Literally anybody. Like, I have cousins that aren't actually my cousins, but we call them cousins because my Uncle Chris like found them and was like, you need a family.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Bless those people. Those people who are just like just open to taking the rest of us riffraff in.
Yeah. No, it's one of my favorite things about that part of my family. They're just like, okay, yeah, there's another seat.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, Thanksgiving this year is going to look a little different. So maybe I'll have to come up with some. I was going to make chili. And the Bon Appetit chocolate chip cookie recipe is so good. I'm going to make them this year. So that's my Thanksgiving dinner, chili and chocolate chip cookies.
That sounds fantastic.
It's not bad. It's a veggie chili. It's like a really great recipe. I feel like this episode, the links in the description are going to be recipes.
All recipes.
That actually would be fine, I think.
If you want to share that chili recipe, I'll share that as well. Listeners, if you make this recipe as well and follow Jodie's tips, let us know.
Send us
Take pictures. Tag us.
Yeah, send us chocolate chip cookie pictures.
One of our two things. One of our listeners and somebody who I think I've just gathered from comments on this podcast in New Jersey is the world. Melissa, hi, hello. I think seems to have lived a very interesting life. And Melissa, if you ever want to come on and talk about a movie with us, please let me and Jodie know. Just shoot us a message on Watchers, because I have a feeling you've got a lot of stories that would be fun for people to hear, including the fact that apparently you worked in the same building as Bill Irwin and he was a nice guy.
Which we love to hear.
It truly made me
Of course he is.
Of course he is. And of course that comment came from you. And I made me very happy to hear that. So thank you for sharing that fact. And and then the other thing, also you, Melissa, I just realized, Jodie, you brought the last podcast, oh Jesus, you brought the last broadcast to us.
Yes.
When we watched Blair Witch Project, and then you and I went on to cover it over on New Jersey is the World. And I, in doing a poor job of keeping up with our messages, Melissa recommended that to us in our Instagram messages like months ago.
Oh,
and
wow.
I just missed it.
Huh.
I went
so
to
this podcast this week is just a conversation between us and Melissa. Is just our side of the conversation.
Yep. Yeah. So if everybody, I wanted to get on the record that that Melissa did try to bring that to our attention much earlier than we found it. So
that's really funny.
I just want to make sure she gets credit for that as well. Bill Irwin, nice man. Last broadcast. I keep wanting to say last broadcast.
I know. Well, when we posted that, or when you posted that episode on New Jersey is the World, a couple people misread it as this was the last broadcast from New Jersey is the World ever and got upset. But it was not.
Pry that podcast from my cold, dead hands.
I know, right?
Hey, Jodie.
Yeah.
You want to tell me what this movie's about?
I keep forgetting that I'm going to have to do this. I mean, I could say it in 3 sentences, but because there's like lots of little detours along the way. Okay, I'm going to try.
Yeah, this one is not nearly as confounding as some of the other movies that we've
It's not
watched.
Top secret.
Yeah.
Okay. So Neal is an advertising executive played by Steve Martin. He's very businesslike and uptight.
Yeah, he's a businessman.
He's a businessman. And he's trying to get home from New York to Chicago for Thanksgiving. He's in a meeting that's going long, which gave me PTSD from working in advertising for 7 years. And so his flight is at 6. He gets to the airport. He just makes the flight. He along the way is trying to get a cab in New York, which pre-Uber was very difficult on certain times of the year, including Thanksgiving or in the rain. And his cab gets stolen, quote unquote, by John Candy's character, Del Griffith.
Del Griffith.
So he steals the cab. They both end up on the same plane, right? Going to Chicago, sitting next to each other. Del Griffiths is like jovial and chatty and a little bit boundaryless. Steve Martin's character, Neal, is annoyed by him. Their plane gets diverted from O'Hare to Wichita, Kansas because of weather. And thus begins a series of unfortunate events, including a hotel stay where they have to share a bed, a train ride where the train breaks down, a bus ride where they break into song. And all through this time, Steve Martin is slowly coming around to enjoying the company of this man, but is also still annoyed by him. He tries to ditch him a few times. And let's see, how much detail do I need to go into? Then there's a rental car situation where things are really starting to get out of control. They run off the road. The car catches on fire. They drive in the car after it's been burned. And eventually, finally, they get to Chicago. They've also hitchhiked at this point as well in the back of a freezer truck. And they get to Chicago. Neal
Well, they've hitchhiked twice.
Oh,
because there's also the one in the
the
Dylan
pickup truck.
Baker's truck.
Yes, with the dog in the back. So many different vehicles. They finally get to Chicago. Neal leaves Del at the train station and heads home. And on his way home, before he gets too far, realizes that all along, I know, it's heartbreaking. All along, while he has been talking about his wife and family, Del has been not hinting, but sort of withholding, but in a way that if Neal had been paying attention, he would have picked up on.
Right.
That his wife is actually passed and he doesn't have a home or a family. And so he turns around, he goes back. Don't cry. He goes back.
I'm already crying.
I know.
I love him so much.
He goes back. He finds Del at the train station, invites him home with him, and the family welcomes him, and they have their Thanksgiving together.
And it's beautiful.
How did I do?
I think you did great.
It's like, it's confusing in the middle there with all of the hijinks.
Right.
There's like a big hijinks section in the middle.
Yeah, most of this movie is hijinks.
Yeah. That involve the different vehicles named in the title, among others.
What did you think overall?
It was so sweet. I think so. Here's the thing. I think the reason that, well, we talked in the beginning about how I thought I'd already seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that I have. And if I did, it was a very long time ago, and I have the memory of a goldfish when it comes to movies.
So it's basically like you hadn't seen it.
It's basically like I hadn't seen it. The only part I remembered was the "those aren't pillows" scene. And I think that's because it's been clipped so many times.
Yeah. And I think it's the cheapest laugh in this movie too. It's it's my least, and it's not that like we talked about when we watched My Blue Heaven about how the like romance between Barney and Vinny is just like kind of a straightforward romance, and there's no like any moments of tenderness between them aren't played as like, you gay.
Yeah.
And so there are two ways. I know I'm getting into the nitty gritty of a stupid scene now, and you haven't even finished answering my first question. But I want to say that like part of the joke of that scene is that John Candy is such an overbearing, like, you know, and free and open, whatever. And Steve Martin is like so uptight, and and them sharing a bed together is funny for that reason. But then there's also and they play it up like when they do the like jumping up like
thing about the bears.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't love that movie, but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. It's not as bad as some I've seen.
Yeah.
And it's just I think so common in the humor at the time. Like that kind of thing.
It's like barely homophobic. It's like you can kind of make a case for it otherwise. And it really is the only moment like
slightly sour note.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it really, so what I thought was, I think the reason that I haven't watched this movie all these years is because I think that I thought it was meaner than it actually is.
Okay.
I thought that it was more biting in the
Uh-huh.
relationship between the two of them. I think maybe because of that clip, or maybe because of other things I'd heard or something, like just a scenario of like overbearing, overly friendly, annoying guy and, you know, businessman annoyed with him.
Mhm.
Sounds like a meaner movie than this actually is. Like there's
Yeah.
some scenes that are kind of, there's especially that one initial mean moment in the hotel room. But this movie had more sweetness and heart than I
Yeah.
expected.
Yeah, and that scene feels like a scene, like a less good version of this movie. That scene would come much later,
Yeah.
and it would all be building up to that.
Yeah.
But instead, you get these two characters that they get kind like their relationship comes to a head there, kind of pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I like that John Candy, that Del sees what how Neil thinks of him that early on and is able to respond to it and defend himself.
Yeah.
And then we still have them building this relationship throughout.
Yeah.
That scene is really incredible. I think it's, you know, they've only been traveling together a short while at that point. And first I'll say, like, one of the things I really love about this movie is, like, John Candy is so sweet and lovely, but he is a pain in the ass, and he is overbearing, and he doesn't have boundaries, and he's not thoughtful. Like, he uses every towel in the hotel, and that is, and leaves his, like, socks and underwear in the sink. Like, that is gross. It's gross. And I think Neil has every right to be. It's not just a guy being, like, too uptight who needs to learn to loosen up. Right. Like, I think My Blue Heaven, Finney's doing crimes, and that's bad.
Yeah.
But he's, like, not really getting in Barney's, like I don't know. Maybe that's just me, whatever. But the big thing with My Blue Heaven is that Barney just needs to loosen up. And I don't think really, like, I understand Neil's frustration. However, when Neil breaks at that beginning part, he gives such a long speech.
Mm-hmm.
It goes on for so long, and he is really nasty in that scene.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, but he and Del, like, this is a
they
movie
don't know
thing.
each other.
They don't know each other.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of think it's fine. But then the thing I really like is that Del defends himself and isn't really, like, and I'm sure deep down he feels it more than he lets. Yeah. And they kind of, like, it's shot as if he's really, like, but the words he's saying where he's like, I like me, my wife likes me.
I know.
Which I wonder what I wonder about his and his wife's relationship. Mm-hmm. How rose colored it is for him knowing that she's been dead for as long as she has, because he does give himself that talk when he's freezing in the car where he's like, you were right, like, I am the least thought whatever. And it's like, oh, so but I also kind of here, there, and everywhere right now.
No, but I also think that, like, so what you're saying is true, that he is sort of boundaryless, and that actually it's totally normal that these two people would be annoyed with each other. And I think that, like, with Barney, like you said, you're right, he just needed to loosen up. I think the, like, quote unquote lesson here is not that he needs to necessarily loosen up, like, maybe a bit, but also it's more just, like, appreciate the family that you have at home and, like, make sure that you're prioritizing them and seeing them more, and, like, you know, and it's more about, like, taking advantage of the time you have with your family, as opposed to, like, this guy's being a dick and needs to learn a lesson,
right?
You know, like, he's kind of being a dick, but it's also kind of understandable. I will say, though, that I realized that I have grown as a person by watching this movie, because if I had seen this in my 20s, I would have been like, I fucking hate John Candy. And, like, he's so sweet. Like, it's not his fault. But, like, I just would have completely identified with the super annoyed, super busy. Like, I lived in New York City in my 20s. I had no time for anybody. I would, like, you know, by the time I left there, I was shoving my way off the subway. I had fully embraced the, like, I hate everybody, leave me the fuck alone, like, mindset. And I would have related so much to Steve Martin's character. But now I feel like I've proved to myself that I've softened, because I was like, oh, like just have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
Like, just talk to John Candy about his life. I know he's not John Candy, he's Dell, but like, talk to him about his life, find out about his wife and what his, family was like. And, like, all of those situations that are so horrible in airports and things are made so much better if you just are a human with the other humans that you're with. And like, Dell knows this,
right? Right.
He's living for those moments of connection with other people, because he doesn't have the connection of his wife anymore.
That's the other thing that I love. I know we joke that I'm the John Candy. We quote unquote joke that I'm the John Candy.
This
in
is canon
podcast.
now. I don't know what you're talking about.
And in general, yes, and I do really feel for and relate to John Candy in this movie, but I also feel for and relate to Steve Martin. Like I think I think I am in general, like, I am not striking up a conversation with a stranger in an airport. In a million years, I am not doing that. I am.
That's
Steve
what I
Martin.
mean when I say I have changed.
Yeah, like, it's just, I am not going to be that person.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, as someone who does spend a lot of time alone, I think that I understand John Candy not, like, he like takes up a lot of space in this movie, and I think a big part of it is he's just not used to having to share his space.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that is like, yes, he's being inconsiderate, but I don't think it's like an intentional thing. And I think a lot of people can be inconsiderate very intentionally. That's not what's going on here.
No,
he's just,
because the background is he hasn't shared a room with someone for 8 years,
right? Yeah.
And like, you can forget how to be considerate in those situations,
right? And I also love that he's not so bumbling. Like, he is, but it's also like the people, he knows somebody everywhere. He's one of those guys,
and they all love him.
They all love him.
Yeah.
And he's good. He's
a salesman. Like, he remembers their names.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so I do like that too, that we don't have to just, like, there are so many movies. I love a buddy movie. I love like enemies to friends, enemies to lovers, like in the case of My Blue Heaven. But so, like, there are so many of these that would play it so much less nuanced.
Well, and
where
I
he
think
would just,
but I think that's why I assumed that I wouldn't like this movie as much as I did, because in my head the movie treated John Candy in that way,
right,
as totally just bumbling, just annoying, just gross, like, and didn't have the, like, he has self-awareness in this movie.
Yeah,
like,
he's
not the stereotypical bumbling idiot, annoying person that I've seen other movies depict, especially a larger bodied character as.
Right.
As like those, as if those two things, the personality trait and the size, go together,
it's
right?
Such a like shortcut.
Yeah. I assume that's what was happening here.
Right.
But he has self-awareness.
Totally. I think of movies that I do love, but it's like, I'm thinking of like David Spade and Chris Farley together have this similar dynamic.
Yes.
And Chris Farley's characters are always so oafish and no self-awareness and so bumbling.
Yep.
And again, I love Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. And I think there's obviously like, I love Chris Farley, and there is a sweetness to his characters always. And there was like, major off-screen love between David Spade and Chris Farley, and I think that comes through a lot in those movies and saves them from being too mean. But those are the less sophisticated version,
definitely,
of what's going on here.
And that's the version that I just don't have the stomach or the time for.
Right.
Like, I can't personally get past that. Like, I'm already not inclined to this kind of humor necessarily anymore, and so when it comes with that edge of cruelty, I just don't care for it. But this was not that at all, and I just felt like it made me sad that John Candy's not around anymore. And I mean, obviously everybody's should be and is sad, and I liked him anyway, but after seeing this I was like, oh right, this is not the stereotype I had in my head of what this character was going to be.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, we haven't even mentioned this is a John Hughes movie.
Right.
And I know that that's a big part of it. So his
Yeah.
movies, like even his teen movies, like I always say, like Ferris Bueller makes the end of that movie makes me cry. It's not as sad, but just like there's so much heart and sweetness in his movies in a way that never feels saccharine to me.
Yeah.
And I will say the end of this movie, it is a little, because you get that like that montage of Steve Martin figuring it out. And
I heard something so interesting about that we have to come back to.
Oh,
yeah. About that scene.
And I think that scene is a little. I also want to talk about that scene is a little. Well, actually, I'm disagreeing with myself. I was going to say that scene feels a little heavy-handed, but I think if you think about it, it's the fact that like Neal was so closed off, like that all it takes is a second, and those scenes are so obviously that they flash back to, pointing to what's really going on there. That if Neal had paid attention for even a second, he would have realized that. So I guess for me to say like it's heavy-handed, I actually am taking that back because it is, but I wonder if that's the point of it. Maybe I don't know. What did you hear?
So last night I listened to, and I recommend people listen to Unspooled generally, the podcast with Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson. But
it's a great podcast.
It's a great podcast. They did like what is the Criterion?
They did the AFI's top 100 movies to start with, and have since branched out.
Right. But they did an episode on planes, trains, and automobiles.
Top 100, or
it's
this
not.
After?
It was from their. It was from their after series. But so, and I was falling asleep when I listened to it last night. So
I hope whatever you say is so wrong.
I don't think it is. If it is, I apologize. But what I remember from before I fell asleep was that
they filmed this in my old high school, and it was while I was taking a test that I just didn't study for.
Exactly. No. So what I heard, what I remember hearing, and credit to Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson, if this is actually true, is that the shot of Steve Martin's face that they have in the close-up while he's having those memories was not Steve Martin acting, because I guess they were having trouble getting the shot the way they wanted, or Steve Martin was having trouble getting the expression that he wanted or something, but it was actually a scene shot like when Steve Martin was preparing for the next scene. They had the camera on him. And so it's not Steve Martin acting like he's thinking about it. It's Steve Martin thinking about the next scene.
Interesting.
Yeah. And
so that's they just got his natural thinking face.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes. So I wish I had more details than that, but I was on melatonin at the time. But I thought that was super interesting because his face is so expressive in that moment, but it's like he's not actually acting. The thing that I wonder though, and like watching that ending where he has that realization and goes and finds him, I know that we're not supposed to think about what's next. We're supposed to just think of this as like a happy ending. But like, what's next? Like, he's not moving in with them.
No, he's not moving in with them. I don't know. I think because, I mean, he says I haven't been in that diner scene. He says I haven't been home in years, and then Neal kind of calls him out on it, and Del backtracks, and he's like, "Oh, it's just a saying. I haven't been home in years."
Right.
But he means I haven't been home in years. You realize, like, he is like that trunk has, I'm guessing, his entire life packed into it, right? And he's just been totally unmoored. And I always think about that. Like, I don't imagine he's somebody, because this doesn't heal the trauma of losing his wife. Like, no. And it seems he has no other family. I don't imagine that he's somebody, and he seems to really love his work and traveling around and making these other connections. Yeah. So I don't imagine that he suddenly like settles down in Chicago, right? Like, yeah, and is doing family holidays with the Pages,
right?
But I do wonder if he, this is he finds himself in Chicago every Thanksgiving now,
right?
Or
Yeah, it's because it's like it almost feels like the goal of the movie was to heal Neal and using Del as a way to do so, and so it's like, well, what's next for Del?
Yeah.
It's funny you said that about like those chance encounters and like him traveling around and all of that. I will say that so Chris has this bit about how Taco Bell is now implementing like the machines that take your order so you're not interacting with a human.
Right.
And I do think that those in-person interactions between strangers can be really, really important to keeping us feeling like human beings.
And I will contend, as I often do when this comes up, that this is a North-South Jersey divide issue, because I will go. I have a roommate who travels a lot, and I am I don't know what the word is, but I am like a chronic introvert. And I will go days without speaking to another person, and it will take me a long time to realize where I'm like, oh, I just the only other being I've talked to this week is my dog.
Yeah.
Now that I make podcasts from home, it's a little different because every week I'm going to talk to somebody at least through my computer screen.
Yeah.
But before that, it would take me maybe this is actually, I'm saying this as if it's a counterpoint to your argument, but maybe it's actually supporting your argument, where I will open my mouth for the first time and be like,
yeah,
right, you have to talk to other people, so maybe not.
So here's the thing. I spend a lot of time alone. I enjoy spending a lot of time alone. I traveled by myself for 2 months just now, got back. And I love it. And I love spending hours and hours and hours by myself. But I will say that in the past few years, I think since COVID, I have begun really cherishing those moments with strangers that I never would have before. When I was in fucking Buffalo, Wyoming, and I went to a thrift store and I'm a friendlier person now than I used to be. And I started a conversation with the old lady at the register. And I find out she's originally from Rhode Island and she grew up on Jamestown and she used to take the ferry to Newport before there was a bridge. And her name is Cece. And I'm now that person. I'm not going to start up a conversation with a stranger necessarily that I want to last a really long period of time.
Right. But
those little moments are so lovely. And I feel like they make us human. I don't know. I really, I've grown. I've metamorphosized into
I think that's
warmer person.
Beautiful. And I think strangers. That it makes, and I think that
am I the John Candy of this podcast?
This is what we're finding out.
Yeah, I'm the jovial person on the plane that you want to shut up. No, I'm definitely not. But
there's a poem by Walt Whitman that I really love. I know this seems like such a side note.
I love it. Let's do it.
But it's called A Noiseless Patient Spider, and it reminds me of this so much. About those throwing out bids for connection, and should I read it? Do you want me to read it?
I would love for you to read a poem. I could. I mean, I haven't brought up Victorian literature in a really long time, so I think we're due for some sort of weird tangent.
I could also drop in a professional reading, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who've performed it. I love poetry, but I'm not a performer. But I'll read it to you, and then we can decide. It's called A Noiseless Patient Spider. A noiseless patient spider. I marked where on a little promontory it stood isolated, marked how to explore the vacant, vast surrounding. It launched forth filament out of itself, ever unreeling them, ever tirelessly speeding them. And you, oh my soul, where you stand, it gives me goosebumps. Surrounded, detached. That part isn't in the poem. Surrounded. And you, oh my soul, where you stand, surrounded, detached, in measureless oceans of space, ceaselessly musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them, till the bridge you will need be formed, till the ductile anchor hold, till the gossamer thread you fling catch somewhere, oh my soul.
I love that.
We give that man like credit for those big sprawling cataloging poems that go on and on and on, and then he throws out this fucking 10-line 2-stanza. It's not even a sonnet. Like it's not long enough to even be a sonnet, and it is like, oh,
there's
God,
a reason we gave him a rest stop, man.
He's got a bridge down here.
Yeah, well, he's got a rest stop. That's important.
But I think that like for all of my shit talk about being an introvert and not wanting, like, I think that like ceaseless musing, venturing, throwing, seeking the spheres to connect them is inherent. And I think that like we like, not to get too whatever, but like we talk so much in the greater conversation about the like loneliness epidemic.
Yes.
It's real. And I think it was real in 1987 too, but it's so much more now that like somebody like somebody like Del Griffith kind of like floating around aimlessly, making these little bits of friendship where he can. And these are people like we said, everybody, I don't remember how he got back here, but they're like people who are so happy to see him and clearly who love him, but they're also people he only sees. It's the guy who he checks in at the hotel. This isn't somebody like who would Del go to if he got sick? Like, well,
I know, but I do think we discount that. I think that like, because it's not somebody who's going to like come take you to the hospital when you're sick, that we think it's not that important. But like the number of like those little tiny connections that I made, even just in the last 2 months being away from home on my own, like those, they're not nothing. Like they're not nothing. They're just not. Like I will take something from each of those little things. Like I went to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln Museum. They have a free museum, delightful museum, highly recommend. If you're in Lincoln, Nebraska, just wander in, hang out, totally free. Look at some art. I love a free museum.
Yeah, for sure.
But at the welcome desk was some undergrad student, and and I teach, and I hadn't been around students in a while, and I was feeling kind of like, delighted to speak to an undergrad, and he was so excited to tell me about the exhibitions, to recommend other museums, to tell me about the quilt show that his class helped organize or something. Like, it was so delightful. I like made sure to tell the like other person on staff what a good job he had done, because he's clearly like doing this as his like work study job or whatever.
Yeah.
Like those things matter. They just do. And like I think that John Candy's character in this movie, like he gets that it's not the same as having his wife at home, but it's something, and it's kept him going for 8 years. And that is still sustenance. It's not the same as his wife at all, but I don't think we're supposed to think that his existence is purely sad.
No.
Because of how loved he is wherever he goes.
Right. And I think that's something for Neal to learn. Because I think, at the beginning of the movie, you wouldn't be surprised if Del says he's got these connections, whatever, and then it turns out that's not the case.
Yeah.
And nobody's happy to see him, and he just hasn't realized that he's been like buffooning his way through.
And again, that would be the mean version of this movie.
Yeah.
Right? But it's not that.
Right.
Like everybody loves him.
We're spending a lot of time talking about Del and his relationships, because I think that is what sort of like, moves this movie along. What do you think? What do you make of Neal's, like?
Well, okay. So Neal's marriage, right?
Yeah.
From what I read, I did do some research, because I can't not. But what I read was that this movie was originally like 3 hours and 45 minutes. And there was a lot in there about sort of a subplot of his wife thinking that he was cheating on her. And so they cut that out, but there's still a tinge of it in their interactions that make it confusing.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah. But originally there was a whole subplot that like she thought he was cheating on her.
weirdly, I'm like, I guess I'm glad they cut it because, like,
it wouldn't serve anything.
And he's so clearly not, like,
yeah.
But it is, but then the way she handles those scenes, like, I just can't imagine my partner calling me and being like, oh, I'm stuck at an airport now, I'm in Wichita, and me meeting that with anything other than, like, concern for them and, like, and disappointment, sure.
Yeah.
But that suspicion, even if the subplot were made, like, clear and did make it in, I would still be like, what would he have had to have done?
Yeah.
To give her that impression.
Jealous, Andrea. women be bitches.
That's true. That's a really good point.
Yeah. You know, like, they're just distrustful. I mean, you know, John Hughes is of his time in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are no women in this movie that have actual characteristics.
No, not even a little bit. She's also so, it's like, weirdly, if you found out that, like, Neal was imagining this home life and his wife was also dead.
Yeah.
Like, she's always shot kind of, maybe this is just in my imagination.
I love you always think that people in the movie are actually ghosts. We've had this conversation before.
In my head, she's shot in, like, soft focus and really gauzy. I don't know if she actually is.
Yeah.
But it just feels that way. Like, especially when they come home and she's at the top of the stairs.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know.
It's also like, how long has it been since he was last home?
Yeah.
It seems like he has also been gone 4 years.
Yeah.
It is so weird.
I think in the context of that subplot existing, her reaction was supposed to be more of a, like, relief that, like, that it's actually this guy that he's helping, and instead it reads as her having an emotional reaction to this person she's never met.
I also was like, are you going to find out that Dell and what is his wife's name? It doesn't matter, does it?
She doesn't have a personality. What does she need a name for?
I should know her name. But I always Susan.
Oh, that's right. It's my mom's name.
I always think that, like, you always get the impression that Dell and Susan have known each other before. Like, it's so
because
strange.
of that sort of over-the-top emotional reaction she has to it.
Yeah.
And so apparently, because there was so much that was cut out, the pieces that are left that kind of were attached to that other idea kind of sort of rub up against the actual plot in an uncomfortable way. They don't quite make sense.
Yeah, it really feels almost like a different movie. It's so strange.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good that they cut it out because, again, like you said, it wouldn't have made sense. But
no.
Also, it left a few little weird details in there that didn't make sense anyway.
It is.
The film's first cut was 3 hours and 45 minutes long. A subplot about Neal's wife not believing him and suspecting that he's with other women was cut.
So crazy. That is such a long, and also I think this is another one of those scripts that John Hughes fired off really fast. He's, like, famous for that.
He was also writing and filming what's the baby movie? Crap. Oh, She's Having a Baby with Kevin Bacon, which is why he has that cameo in the middle or in the beginning.
So funny.
Yeah.
So funny. Yeah. I love how every story, because we've done a couple of Hughes movies and you and I are both, like, pretty big Hughes fans, so, like, this is one of those things where, like, you don't, any research you do, the first thing you're going to learn about John Hughes is that he was always writing, and sometimes he would be supposed to be working on one thing and instead overnight he'd turn out another script. And I think, is it like Ferris Bueller was written when they were supposed to be doing maybe some kind of
something
Wonderful?
With Weird Science and one of the other ones too. There's a lot of
just
overlap.
all the time. He's just always doing this, which is I hate you, John Hughes. Can you imagine? And then for one of them to, like, one of those scripts to produce a 4-hour-long movie?
I know.
Like,
I know.
Incredible.
Well, and so one thing I didn't realize, I mean, I knew about this sort of, like, fictional town of Shermer, Illinois, that everything kind of, a lot of his movies revolve around.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that in his head, everything is connected.
Yeah.
Like, so I read an article, it was like one of those 8 things you didn't know, blah, 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 about this movie. And apparently in 1989, John Hughes said, when I started making movies, I thought I would just invent a town where everything happened. Everybody in all of my movies is from Shermer, Illinois. Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles lives 2 doors down from John Bender. Ferris Bueller knew Samantha Baker from 16 Candles. And so in his head, all of these people are in the ssame general community, which is wild. And he does all of these little like Easter eggy things across movies too. So like, I think you probably know this already, but in the scene where his wife, Neil's wife, Susan, is watching TV, waiting for Neil to come home, you don't see the TV, but you can hear a couple arguing. And that's actually a scene from She's Having a Baby, which was literally like, came out like 3 months before or after this.
That's so funny. I know it doesn't matter, but I just love a connected universe like that.
And apparently during the closing credits of She's Having a Baby, John Candy appears briefly as his character Chet from Great Outdoors.
Fantastic.
Like, he just kind of like...
It's just a fun little... It doesn't do anything other than...
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything other than like... It's just fun.
It's just fun.
I love stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also those Illinois suburb houses... The like Home Alone house, the house in this movie are
apparently
like,
they were in the same neighborhood
in the
real life.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all the same universe.
That's like as a kid, me dreaming of like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I've made it if I have a Home Alone
what
house.
Adult life is going to be like. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Did you find out about the other casting possibilities that never came to fruition?
I know about the main one. You might have some others.
So the main one I found was that Neil was going to be the main one I found out was that John Hughes originally wanted Tom Hanks to be Neil, and for John Travolta to be Del. That would not have worked. I am sorry.
I want to look up. I want to look up where we are in each of their careers at this point.
So Hanks was working on Big at the time.
Tom Hanks totally makes sense for that role. Like, I think he's a little sweeter than Steve Martin, and that might not, but he's so good. Like, that speech that Steve Martin gives where he's like, I fucking want my fucking car, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can hear that in Tom Hanks' voice. Sure. And you being like taken aback by Tom Hanks saying fuck so many times.
Yeah.
But
John Travolta?
Have you ever seen Michael?
No. Nor do I want to. I know what movie you're talking about. I worked in the video store when it was coming out, I think.
Where he's the schlubby angel?
I can see the cover of the VHS in my head as you're talking about it.
But that was playing against John Travolta type at that point.
Right.
Like, the whole point was that John Travolta was this, like, kind of, like, charming...
Yeah, he was like a cool guy.
Cool guy.
Yeah. But the other
one... And that was late. Like, Michael is... sometime in the mid-90s,
yeah, when I was working at the
1996.
There you go.
So
Empire Video, Baldwin, New Jersey.
1987 is a weird, because he had done at this point Saturday Night Fever, Grease, Urban Cowboy, Staying Alive. Yeah, those were the big ones. He hadn't given us anything, because like even Look Who's Talking isn't until 1989.
Yeah,
so like. I wonder what interesting to think about either what John Hughes saw in John Travolta that made him think he would work for Del, or what Del's character would have looked like.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah. Like whether he was like hoping to get Travolta to play like wildly against type, or whether Del would have been a little bit different.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely would have been different.
Maybe he would have been like more, because like it's funny because Neil playing the like marketing guy and like in the fancy suit and whatever, but he's not really like schmoozy or slick at all.
Yeah.
And maybe that juxtaposition could have worked, where like instead of Del being like this like affable guy who everybody likes, because it could be more of him being really like a slick salesman who's like kind of and I could see John Travolta doing that. Maybe
it would have been such a different movie.
And you almost feel like if you're going to have the two of them, what makes more sense for the time would be have John Travolta play Neal because he looks
Steve
better
Martin
in a
be his
suit,
silly version
and
of himself.
have Tom Hanks be his silly version.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Tom Hanks. Yeah, the other one that I saw was here we go. So it says Hanks was working on Big, and the production company didn't want to give the role to Travolta, whose star had fallen after appearing in a series of movie flops. So because Saturday Night Fever and all of that.
Yeah.
But also,
Interesting.
I can't believe you didn't have this one. Rick Moranis was considered for Neal. How happy are you right now? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And John Goodman was considered for Del.
Yeah, it's so funny because
Yeah.
It's so funny because we talked when we did My Blue Heaven about Steve Martin playing the Rick Moranis role.
Yep.
And what that would have looked like, and it just would have been him. It would have been Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. You know, like it would have been that version of Steve Martin.
Yeah. Yeah. Roger Ebert also loved this movie. Very much. It was in his like top 100 of all time.
That's nice. Do you have the review from 87?
I think so. Yeah. I also found an article that he wrote when he was doing his like 100 best movies thing later on in like 2000. And there's a story in there which is actually quite sad, but it's about him seeing John Candy. I might just read this little bit just because I feel like it, you know, you can't really talk about John Candy without thinking about the fact that he's not around anymore. But he said, one night a few years after Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was released, I came upon John Candy sitting all by himself in a hotel bar in New York, smoking and drinking, and we talked for a while. We were going to be on the same TV show the next day. He was depressed. People loved him, but he didn't seem to know that, or it wasn't enough. He was a sweet guy and nobody had a word to say against him, but he was down on himself. All he wanted to do was make people laugh, but sometimes he tried too hard and he hated himself for doing that in some of his movies. I thought of Del. There's so much truth in the role that it transforms the whole movie. Hughes knew it and captured it again in Only the Lonely in 1991. And Steve Martin knew it and played straight to it. And so like that's part of what I think is the reason that my reaction to this movie was surprised at how sweet and heartfelt it was and kind of direct in taking on this idea of like loneliness, because it was, I think a lot of people have said like closer to their actual personalities in real life than like a lot of their other roles. So now I made you sad. I didn't mean to make you sad.
Everybody's shocked when I say that I love John Candy so much, but I just love him so much, and it is so heartbreaking to think of how much joy he's brought.
I know.
So many. Oh, I am crying.
I know.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
How much joy he's brought so many people, and to hear that like he couldn't always feel that even when he was alive is just it's really, really sad.
Yeah, it is. I do want to just give a quick, on a lighter note, shout out to Edie McClurg, who plays the counter person. As someone who's worked in a ton of retail situations and has been screamed at many times.
Oh, yeah.
I love her like steely resolve that like takes over her after she's gone through her friendliness bit at the beginning when she realizes he's just going to be an asshole, and you just see her face just like shift.
She puts that like, I've been doing this too long to let you get to me.
Yep. It's like, oh, that's how it's going to be. All right. Okay. Yeah, it's a great little cameo.
Yeah, she is so good. Well, I think what we should do maybe is talk through this cast, because it is kind of unbelievable. But yeah, starting with her. That scene, because this movie's rated R is the other thing.
And it's only for that cursing.
Because
he says fuck like 100 times.
So so many times. It is, and I think that like Steve Martin, we knew him from like doing really like big kind of silly, like Three Amigos is just a couple of years before this. His role in Little Shop is before this by a year, and he is big and weird and dark and but like cartoonishly so.
Yeah.
But he's not known for like saying fuck a million times, so it's still, he's like a year before he is in Little Shop of Horrors, where his character openly admits to shooting puppies with a BB gun. Like he is an abuser in that movie of one of my favorite characters of all time with Audrey. Like, he
Yeah.
is terrible, but he's so cartoonish that it's like that. And that movie is basically a live action cartoon anyway. It's like I said, it's like Frank Oz puppets. And so, like, for him to just be regular person mean is like,
Yeah.
it's kind of tough to watch him do that.
And he has said in an interview that this felt like the first real, I don't think that he meant to say it in a way that downplayed everything else he had done, but that it was the first like real person he'd been asked to play. Because I'm looking at sort of his filmography, and like in terms of movies before this was The Jerk, Dead Man Don't Wear Plaid, The Man with Two Brains, The Jerk 2, Three Amigos.
We don't have to say The Jerk 2 out loud.
I
we
know.
can just
Roxanne, LA Story and Roxanne and LA Story Roxanne came out at the same time, and LA Story was right after this. So yeah, he had been in a lot of these sort of like really over the top goofy roles, you know, very Saturday Night Live, but in movie form in some ways. So yeah, this was definitely a switch.
I think it's cool to see it. It was smart of John Hughes, and but
yeah, the other cast, there's a lot of like one-off scenes with like really
she's
crazy...
such a good example of that.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at her IMDb, it is amazing. Really? Oh my god.
Because I mean, I think of her from Ferris Bueller as his secretary.
She's also, have you ever seen Airborne?
No.
Oh god, do I want to make you watch Airborne? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to you, our listeners, but Airborne is a movie about a surfer who moves to the Midwest. He's like young, and he like has to go live with his like aunt and uncle, and it's such a weird movie. He was a surfer. He moves to the Midwest, where maybe it's not the Midwest. He moves away from the ocean.
Okay.
And in this town, everybody is weirdly into rollerblading, like weirdly into rollerblading. And he starts getting bullied, and then he has to prove to the like cool roller blading crew that he can hang. And Seth Green is in it and plays his
of course Seth Green is in it.
And Jack Black is in it. And she plays his aunt, and she's this like she sounds like Bobby's mom from Bobby's World. Like, she's also she does voices in Bobby's World too. So it's like
she's in everything. I'm looking at her IMDb right now, and it is like 17 pages long.
Yeah, she is in literally everything. Yeah, she has that's her voice. Like, I'm sure she plays it up a little bit, but like,
she was a voice in The Secret of Nim.
Yeah, her IMDb is incredible.
Yeah,
she does voices and everything. She's been in a million movies, and I could talk about her forever.
She was a voice in the Snorks. Do you remember the Snorks? Yeah,
I remember the Snorks. You mean the underwater Smurfs?
Smurfs, yeah. Okay, good. Just making sure that I've gotten to you.
She's incredible. She's in a million things, and I love her. I just love her so much. You already mentioned Kevin Bacon is also in this for a second.
Yeah.
Where was he in his career at this point?
He was filming She's Having a Baby right before this with John Hughes.
But was he like people knew who he was?
Yes. This was post Footloose, and
what a weird to have him. Like,
it was his idea to have this little cameo.
Funny.
He was living in New York at the time. And so he just came out for like no lines. Came out for a quick afternoon.
Because in my head I was like, oh, is this like his? Because you know, I'm bad with timelines. I'm like, oh, was this our first like peek at Kevin Bacon? Nope. But no,
post
not at all.
He was huge.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
Michael McKean, of course, he plays he's the cop. Do we need to run through? I don't think we need to run through Michael McKean's credits, do we?
I don't think so.
He has 251 credits on IMDb.
Yeah, he's kind of been in everything.
Literally everything. And he's one of those two where he shows up, he's going to be great even when he's like he's only in this for 10 seconds and it's not a huge scene, but he's great. I'm a big Dylan Baker fan. He's one of those guys who he's just been acting forever. He's in so many things. I don't know that he's ever had a lead role in anything huge.
Yeah, but I've seen him in a million things as well.
Yeah.
He is in one of the really gross scenes that I texted you about that I said you should have told me there were so many mouth sounds in this movie.
Because he's the like redneck trucker.
Yeah.
And he's like mean to his he's like mean to his wife, but in a way that's like
pretty
kind of supportive.
But yeah, he says something like, you know, our son came out sideways and she didn't even scream or something.
Came out sideways.
Yeah.
And then he's like, yeah, because he's like, she might look little, but she's strong. Like he wants her to
take the bags.
Yeah, and they don't let her, obviously. That's like one of his first roles. He was in 2 other movies. One he wasn't even credited in 86 and 87. And then he's in a million things. I know him best from Delirious, which is another John Candy movie a few years later that I love. I love Delirious so much. I will say it's a movie I haven't seen in a long time, and I wonder if I'll have to. But it's another John Candy lead that John Candy is wonderful in. But I mean, he is in. When I say it's crazy. This movie just has so many people who have done so much since, and it's pretty early for a lot of them.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else specifically we want to shout out? I think they're the big ones, right?
Yeah, those are the big ones.
Oh, I mean, Matthew Lawrence.
Yeah.
Plays the
kid.
His son.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. What a cast, what a movie.
I know. There were a lot of sort of things that were just so, I mean, this is like such an obvious point, but like there's so many 80s things in this movie that are now looking back, like people were smoking everywhere.
I said like, that's our Jersey connection, is
the smoking in the diner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you could still smoke in diners, I might still be a smoker.
Oh my God.
Like there's a chance I might never have quit.
Yeah, I mean, you could smoke literally everywhere. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was very sweet. I just want to mention, I watched it on Pluto, maybe? Whatever that free one is.
That's the free one with the ads.
It wasn't Tubi, it was Pluto. I got an ad in the middle of it that I thought for a second was part of the movie.
Was it for shower curtain rings?
No. Did you watch it on Pluto also? Okay.
No.
There was an ad about Chicago being the rattiest city. I feel like I hallucinated this, but I swear to God, and I thought for a second it was part of the movie because it was about Chicago. I think maybe I had like an aneurysm during this, but
Chicago. What? Chicago was ranked I was going to jokingly ask if you meant had the most rats. Yeah. Chicago was ranked the rattiest city by Orkin Pest Control for the 9th straight year.
Yeah, there was literally an ad that mentioned this in the middle of the movie. And I literally was like, what is happening right now?
Wow.
Like, yeah.
Hey, okay, Chicago number 1. Los Angeles number 2. New York number 3. DC number 4. San Francisco number 5. Philly number 6. Baltimore 7. Denver 8. Detroit 9. Cleveland, Akron 10. Hate to brag. Jersey doesn't even crack the top 10.
And Providence isn't even on the list either.
Do you got a lot of rats in Providence?
I had one run over my hand one time when I was taking the trash out. I thought you'd rather pick up a rat, Andrea, than a snake.
I will. Yeah. No.
Than a roach. That's what it was.
Yeah. But I wouldn't be excited about it.
No, I screamed like a small child when it happened.
Not a street rat.
No, it was big too. Anyway, happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners. Are we good with planes, trains, and cars and stuff?
So the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is the soundtrack to this movie is unremarkable in almost every way.
So you want to remark on the unremarkable soundtrack?
Well, because that's so not the case. Like John Hughes movies, like Don't You Forget About Me?
Yeah. Well, did you hear about the...
Yes.
Okay, that's what you want to talk about. Got it.
Yeah. And so I always think about that. Like even the closing song that Every Time You Go Away is like lackluster. It's And it's a cover
Yeah, it's a
of
cover.
the original.
Yeah.
And so what I found out while I was reading about this movie, that I am desperate to hear, and I don't think there's any way to, is that Elton John originally, he wrote a song for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so the theme for this movie was supposed to be an Elton John song, which I'll bet would have been incredible. And from this, like, I think it's probably the same 8 things you didn't know, whatever article that you referenced earlier. I'm just going to read from it a little bit. According to the lyricist Gary Osborne, he was like brought on to compose the song with Elton. The song was nearly finalized before some like weird, they called contractual technicalities, stopped it from happening. Apparently Paramount, who produced the film, wanted to own the rights to the song, and Elton's team was like, no, like, we're just not going to let that happen. And it is crazy to me that Paramount didn't just back down. Like, you could have had an original Elton John song on this movie, you idiots. And then, so they passed on that, and then they reached out to Paul Young. They were going to use Every Time You Go Away, and again,
they fucked it up.
Right. And so they had to go with a cover of Every Time You Go Away. So it's Every Time You Go Away is schmaltzy.
Yeah, it is.
To begin with, it's not great. And then to have...
It's a weird note.
Yeah. And then to have a weird cover of it on top of... And that's the song playing in that weird scene when he's reunited with his wife. Like, it just is like such an odd thing. What other... Oh, Girls Just Want to Have Fun has the same thing where...
The weird cover.
Yeah. Movies are so weird.
I will say, in the episode of Unspooled that I listened to while on melatonin last night, Amy Nickerson did float a conspiracy theory that the 2002 song "This Train Don't Stop There Anymore" by Elton John was actually written for this movie and just not released for another like 15 years.
Wait, how familiar are you with this song?
She read the lyrics last night while I was on melatonin, so mildly.
I
read them.
Buy it.
I know, it's not a bad theory.
You may not believe it, but I don't believe in miracles anymore. And when I think about it, I don't believe I ever did for sure. All the things I've said in songs, all the purple prose you bought for me, reality's just black and white. The sentimental things I'd write never meant that much to me. I used to be the main express, all steam and whistles heading west, picking up my pain from door to door. Riding on the storyline, furnace burning overtime, but this train don't stop. This train don't stop. This train don't stop here anymore.
Yeah, I know.
Do you think?
Not a bad theory.
Wow. I wish if you could hook my brain up to one of them brain machines, you would see it lighten up so big right now.
Those brain machines.
God. When I say that I don't care, it really means my engine's breaking down. The chisel chips my heart again. The granite cracks beneath my skin. I crumble into pieces on the ground. If that ain't Neal Page letting his guard down.
Someone should rescore the end scene of the movie to that song instead. And just cue it to come in right when the other song comes in. I don't know how to do that, but someone should.
Someone.
So all that to say, once you're done with our episode, and if you want to hear more about this movie, go listen to the Unspooled episode, because from what I remember in my melatonin haze.
Amy Nicholson is a genius. Yeah. That is, wow, that's, honestly, I don't care if it's true or not. That is thrilling.
It's now
for
canon.
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's also very Elton John like to be like asked to write a song for a movie called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and then to write a big ballad that's just straight up with a train metaphor.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Elton John, obviously. I'm a human with a heart. Yeah. But like, so I don't know that subtlety is always his.
Fair. Yes. I agree.
What if the ending was scored to Crocodile Rock?
Yeah, not so much. I know. I'm like, it makes sense.
It totally makes sense.
I don't know.
Wow. This is huge for me in particular.
Breaking news.
Exactly. Beep, 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 beep.
Okay. Well, thank you for making me watch this, because I thought I had maybe. Apparently I hadn't. It was much sweeter and much more heartfelt than I thought it was going to be, and I very much enjoyed it.
I'm so glad. Thank you for going on that journey with me and with our friends Del and Neal.
Can I use this really bad segue that I just came up with in my head to talk about next week's movie?
Uh-huh.
Since we're on a transportation kick, we're going to go from planes, trains, and automobiles to New Jersey Transit buses. I am a professional.
Now, what are we?
Okay. So I know I said last week that we were going to do one more silly movie before we moved on to our December plan of just like giving ourselves the present of watching both of our favorite movies that we've both seen. But I changed my mind. After I watched Planes, Trains, and Automobiles the other night, I finally watched another movie that's been on my list for quite a while for its Jersey ties. And that movie is Paterson with Adam Driver. This is not a silly movie. This is probably the polar opposite of Top Secret, my last pick. Like, you could not get more opposite of what I made us watch last week.
I've never seen Paterson.
Yeah.
We've given folks, like, we've had quite a few silly ones.
Yeah.
So I think it's and I will, just to show our hand a little bit for next month. I don't know that we're going to get quite as silly as these last few, but we're going to get
a little silly.
We're going to get a little silly.
Yeah.
So I like this little bit of a palate cleanser.
Yeah. So if you don't know, Paterson is a movie. It's a Jim Jarmusch movie. Very, it's been called twee. I don't know that that's actually appropriate, but it's about a bus driver named Paterson who is from Paterson. And it's,
what?
Yeah.
I didn't know that part.
It's about a bus driver named Paterson.
What are the odds?
Played by Adam Driver.
Oh, bus driver.
Uh-huh. Named Paterson, played by Adam Driver. And it's sort of a week in the life. It's a very quiet movie. It's about poetry. It's about taking inspiration from the everyday and the quotidian.
Does it have... I don't know how to ask this question because it must be. How does it, or maybe don't tell me yet. I just want to put out there, maybe for our listeners, Jodie, would you recommend, what about the William Carlos Williams poem Paterson?
It's definitely referenced in this movie.
Okay.
This movie is hyper aware of all of the literary and other references people from the town of Paterson, New Jersey.
I'm so excited.
There is a picture of Uncle Floyd on the wall of a bar.
I am so excited.
The fact that you haven't seen this movie yet is shocking, but also delightful to me because now I get to make you watch it. It is very heavy on the poetry.
Oh, no. Oh, geez.
So, and the poems in the movie, I'm not going to say much more than this, but the poems in the movie that are theoretically written by Adam Driver are actually written by a real legitimate poet from like the New York school. So it's not like you have to listen to
Is he a Jersey poet?
I think he's a New York poet. I know.
Boo.
I know, but it's close.
But fine.
But yes, this movie is very, very, very aware of William Carlos Williams too. It's like a big part of the movie.
Do you think it would be worth encouraging our listeners? Paterson is long, the poem. It's an epic poem.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be...
I don't think that it's necessary to... I mean, like... Yeah, I don't want to say too much more. I don't think that it's necessary to enjoy the movie. I think being familiar with the fact, just from what we're talking about here, that Paterson, New Jersey, has a very rich history of writers being fascinated with the city, writing about the city.
Oh, I'm going to be so annoying next week.
I know.
Oh, I'm so excited.
I'm like,
I'm glad we got a little Whitman this week. That worked out well. I was going to say,
you literally read a poem this week, and now we're going to be like, and I will say after watching this movie, I do kind of want to read Paterson. Like, I've never read the William Carlos Williams poem. I think this is one where like we're going to get real Jersey about it. But even if you're not from Jersey, this is a very well-reviewed movie. Like, this is not us having you watch some schlock from like 1984 that was made for $900. Like, this is a real movie. And Adam Driver is really, really good in it. So,
ooh, I'm excited.
Yeah, where can you find Paterson? Paterson movie. Where did I watch it? Something fed it to me. One of my services. Oh, it's on Prime Video.
God, Patterson is so good. Oh, so excited. I know that's not the point. I'm not going to make...
Our episode next week is just going to be you reading Patterson. It is on Prime Video for free. I don't know that there are other places where you can find it right now because it's not that old of a movie. I think you can buy it on YouTube. I think, one thing that we haven't mentioned in a while is that you can, if you have a library card for your local library, many of them subscribe to Canopy.
Great point.
Canopy does have Patterson. So you can watch it with your library card.
There you go.
For free.
And if you don't have a library card, get a library card. You can most places you can apply for them online and get your number that you need. Total side note, heartbreaking to hear that New York libraries are going to be closed on weekends due to budget cuts for a million reasons. That really
public libraries
broke my heart.
Are incredible.
Yeah.
So you can, if you have a library card, you can watch it on Canopy. I am looking forward to watch it. I knew that we should do this movie because when I started watching it, I started to want to take notes like I do when we're watching a movie for the podcast.
And
I was like, okay. I was not sure at first because I know we had said we were going to go kind of silly, but this is going to be such an interesting conversation. And like, if you don't know anything about Paterson, New Jersey, maybe look into it before you watch or after, but
we will. I'm so sorry. You're gonna get a history lesson. You're gonna get a poetry lesson. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm so excited.
It's just gonna happen, and then we'll get back to talking about the silly movies we love.
Yeah. No, I think this is really worth watching. It had been one of those movies that I'd like pinned on whatever service it was on and said like, yeah, I'll watch that someday. And it had been there for like 6 months, and then last night it just fed it to me again, and I was like, you know what? I got some time. And I was thinking about it so much afterwards.
I think I have added to my Thanksgiving tradition this year. I'm going to read Patterson and then watch Patterson instead of Planes, Trains.
I love that.
God, before the grass is out, the people are out and bare twigs still whip the wind. Like that, like the language it's William Carlos Williams. I'm not, if you know any, like it, that's where I'm sorry, but the phrase, no ideas, but in things. If you've ever heard that, it's often like thrown around as if it's like just like writing advice, but it's a line from Patterson. Say it. No ideas, but in things. Mr. Patterson has gone away to rest and write. Inside the bus one sees his thoughts sitting and standing. His thoughts alight and scatter.
I'm not saying anything right now. Anything I say is going to just make you more excited to watch this movie, but also maybe ruin parts of it for you.
Let's go watch Patterson.
Everybody go watch Patterson. We'll see you in Jersey.
We'll see you at the Great Falls.
Yes, we will. You will see a lot of the Great Falls.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, we'll see you there.
Oh, wait, find us at WatchersPodNJ.
Yeah, so find us on Instagram at WatchersPodNJ. Find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM.
I'm at AQ Andrea Q.
And we will see you in Jersey.